It's the Wilk Report. I'm Michael Wilk coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio. With me again is Larry Bernard. How are you, Larry?
I'm doing good.
All right, we've got some news today. We're going to start off with the box office mojo. It seems Venom, as of today, October 14th, 15th now, 142 million,
Venom's got legs.
108,258 dollars. But weekend, second weekend box office take was about $35 million, give or take. That's a 56.4% drop from last weekend.
But it's gonna stay a hit at this point.
Yeah, it's doing pretty well for itself. I mean, the numbers don't lie. Like I said, I was kind of surprised, and I don't mind admitting that I was wrong. Just based on the news that was coming out of production and the early reviews, I didn't think it was going to do well, but it seems to be doing all right.
Yeah. Now we need to see if Sony can put one foot in front of the other when it comes to the Spider-Man series that they want to do.
Yeah, because right now Spider-Man is basically on loan to Marvel, which is insane. But yeah, it's because Sony grabbed up the movie rights to Spider-Man before Marvel Studios actually could. So so they really have Spider-Man on loan from Sony right now for the movies. I mean, they still own the comic book, obviously, and everything else, but the success of Venom might actually jeopardize Spider-Man's continued existence in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because they might decide, oh hey, we did all right with this, and so now we're going to hold on to it. But I'm really not sure how that's going to work out for Sony, because right now Disney is pretty much buying up everything that moves. So I don't know. They might buy out
And
Sony.
Sony's also kind of cash strapped, so
Yeah,
it might be a realistic thing for Sony to just sell out. And that could be another element to this. The success of Venom could enable them to get a reasonable price for a sale.
yeah, and yeah. So that would be interesting. But at the same time, I kind of hope they decide to stick it out, because honestly, between Disney and pretty much CBS and everything else. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of media consolidation. I'm like, can we just have, these separate companies remain separate? I'm sick and tired of all of them being bought up by either Disney or AT&T. And I really don't like where a lot of this is going, because all these,
Now, don't worry, in another 20 years, Disney and AT&T will have a merger.
oh God, no, I hope not.
uh,
Uh, but yeah, Venom's doing well. The Walking Dead, however, is not really doing all that well. According to
because it's dead.
Forbes.com, Paul Tassi writing, last week there was good news and bad news when it came to the season 9 premiere of The Walking Dead. The good news was that the premiere was solid, marking what appeared to be a change in the wind for The Walking Dead as a whole under new showrunner Angela Kang. The bad news was that way fewer people had stuck around to watch it after the conclusion of the Negan War in Season 8. The premiere had 6.08 million viewers, down from 7.92 million in the Season 8 finale, and way down from 11.44 million in the Season 8 premiere. It's actually the lowest rated episode of the show since a singular episode in Season 2. But the problem is that things are clearly about to get even worse. And basically, a lot of it has to do with uh, characters being killed off. Glenn and Abraham, for example, got killed off, and then there was a huge drop off. Carl got killed in season 8, and there was another drop
maybe
off.
maybe audiences are tired of brutal, oppressive, nihilist storytelling.
That's possible, and now they've made it official that Rick Grimes is going to be killed off pretty soon. So
I mean,
that's
who's left from the original cast
yeah.
of characters? Who?
Right. Well, is Carol still alive? I don't know if I haven't been watching the past couple of seasons.
I haven't been watching ever because the first season was kind of interesting, but I was already at the edge of my ability to take zombies. I
Yeah,
was like the zombie thing had already worn its welcome out with me.
yeah. Well, yeah, I kind of got into it until about season 5-ish, and then I canceled my Netflix account for a while. But it's like, yeah, the show's winding down where they're killing off pretty much your entire original cast, and that's to me, if you're going to kill off your lead after 9 seasons, yeah, that's pretty much a sign that it's done. I don't know if it's going to even get a season 10 at this point.
And I mean, it's not like they're really gonna have the classic 10 season distribution panel for syndication. Whatever money there is to make is going to be made on whatever cable channels repackage it and streaming services.
Yeah, and really, I don't think it can really continue on like, say, Supernatural, where they just keep going because they have no other careers outside the
You know
show
what?
anymore.
It's because hey, let's end the world and then reboot it, and now there's a new devil. Supernatural, everybody. And
Yeah,
hey, let's have Frank and Dean or Hank and Dean, whatever they are. Let's have them go to Scooby Doo's universe.
yeah, and I think you've pretty much killed and resurrected every character in Supernatural at this point. So
Eh.
yeah, but uh, but yeah, moving on, we've got Goblin Slayer.
Second episode was a lot less hardcore,
Yeah,
but it had good story and character development.
yeah. We got introduced to Goblin Slayer's adoptive sister. Apparently, there's some backstory between those two characters, where they were both adopted by this farmer after their parents were killed by goblins. Um, but there's also a lot of still a lot of stuff that definitely is not for kids. Just showing a screen cap right now, and this is about as graphic as you're going to see in the show, actually, because uh, they can't show everything because it's on Crunchyroll. But
Yeah.
but
But Crunchyroll, when the show originally came out, labeled it as PG-13.
yeah, and they neglected to mention that uh, yeah, they're yeah, because there's a scene in episode 2, and a spoiler alert for people who are watching these and looking at the screen captures. Um, yeah, so there's in the universe that Goblin Slayer inhabits, uh, goblins make raids, they kidnap people, occasionally rape women and eat them, uh, which is kind of confirmed uh, by a guild merchant when someone tries to hire someone to kill the goblins that have been pestering his farm, and she kind of confirms it. So, but yeah, a lot of this is, yeah, it's really kind of setting things up because the goblins are pretty badass in this one. They might be small but it's again picking up from the first episode and this episode, uh, rookie adventurers go to take on the goblins and end up coming back either in pieces or not at all, because they underestimated and didn't equip themselves properly. But Goblin Slayer pretty much does this exclusively.
And the interesting thing was the priestess, had a moment where she said, "Why did the Earth Goddess give me this miracle to allow to do that thing to happen?" And then she prayed, and it rained, which was good because that helped Goblin Slayer out more.
Yeah,
That's kind of really subversive there a little bit.
yeah, it is, and it really just kind of goes to show that this is a show that is really not for kids, and I'm really kind of mad at Crunchyroll for labeling this PG or PG-13 because it is pretty graphic, and I mean,
But
for
by the Japanese standards, this is what kids who are 13 would be watching.
yeah, so kind of a culture clash here because yeah, I
Mm.
mean the Japanese standards for what's acceptable for a teenager and what's acceptable for an adult, they're way different from what we have. Because
Oh,
over here we're still very puritanical.
so related to anime, little aside, Elon Musk wants to build a mecha.
Yeah, Elon Musk wants to build a lot of things.
And he's also decided, since he's in the middle of not being allowed to run his company, he's been giving out some anime advice to people about what his favorite animes are on Twitter.
Really? So Elon Musk is giving anime advice. This I've got to see. Let me look that up real
Give me a
quick here.
second here. Let me get the other one, the other thread here. Here, because I just wanted to. This is just weird. Here's the other Twitter thread. And he starts breaking down his feelings on several different animes.
Alright, I don't think I'm getting the link here.
Let me try doing it another way then.
Try sending it through
Because
Facebook.
luckily we have multiple ways to do this. We're advanced boomer technology here.
Oh, yes. Obviously. Alright, so let's go ahead and call this up. And yes, Elon Musk saying, "I love your name."
Which is a pretty good anime movie.
Okay,
good
yeah.
quality animation.
Alright, so it's finally loading on my browser. Alright, so yeah, so exclusive screenings in UK and Ireland cinemas on the 24th of November 2016. Alright, so this is an older one. But he posted the link to this today, early in the morning. Yeah, so he's busy promoting anime. And of course someone's asking him, please tell me you watch Evangelion.
And after that, he said it's time to create a mecha at 1:28 a.m. I'm not saying that narcotics or a lack of psych medication could be a factor, but there's strong reasons to believe that narcotics or lack of psych medication may be a factor.
Yeah. Well, people are pushing Evangelion, so. Yeah, so let's see if we can find. Let's see if we can find the tweet here because there's a lot. Yes, here it is. 4:28 a.m. Eastern Time. It is time to create a mecha. And of course, someone replied, there are more important matters at hand. Genetically engineered cat girls are possible, scientists say, but we lack funding. Oh my God.
There are moments where the internet is worth it. And this is one of those moments.
Yeah, and of course someone says, let's do both. A mobile suit that can only be co-piloted with a cat girl, like Frank's cat instead of a dinosaur girl. Oh my God. Yeah, it's stuff like this that really makes me laugh. Oh my God. But yeah, so we're getting to the point now where reality is starting to become a parody of itself.
There's a term that I think it was Umberto Eco came up with in some of his writings, hyper-reality. That the only way to express how real things are is to become so totally fake that it's even more real than reality.
Yeah. Yeah. But speaking of reality, we've got The Telegraph reporting that BBC will have more gay characters in its shows to combat what it calls heteronormative culture. But, and before anyone goes apeshit about this, because I know there's a lot of SJW backlash on the interwebs, but there's an interesting thing in the article, and I'm going to quote the first couple of paragraphs here, and you can read the rest at the link. The BBC is going to increase the number of LGBT people appearing in its programs and news output as part of new diversity reforms. But, and this is the clincher here, they will be, quote, incidental, quote, portrayals, meaning that their sexuality is not part of a storyline or directly relevant to a news item. which is kind of what Star Trek used to do back in the 90s before it got canceled and then off the air for decades. And then,
You mean like the random guy in the skirt in the background of TNG?
right, well, that was the future in mid 80s. It was, it was a different aesthetic. Because they figured it was a future and fashion would become pretty blurred. Although, for all we know, it could have been a Delton.
Could have been. But I suspect that this is kind of going to go well because the BBC's been slowly doing stuff like this for a while now. And they've been kind of pushing the camel's nose under the tent, as it were. So I think they feel comfortable that they can just say, yeah, this is a thing we're doing.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, I am kind of glad that if they're going to do this, they're taking the track of, okay, let's just make... Because it's kind of recognizing a reality is that more and more people are coming forward and coming out of the proverbial closet, and that kind of has to be recognized. And because television and film kind of does reflect society at large to an extent, and you do have to kind of acknowledge the reality of the world because it's changing, demographics are changing, and you do need to reflect that reality if you're going to have TV and film because it makes it for more believable. I mean, yeah, you could try and lose yourself in a way of a viewpoint of the world that goes back to the 1950s before we had all this, but it's kind of like but it's not really reflecting reality, and even back then it wasn't reflective of reality because people didn't want to try and address it back then. But now it's like, okay, we kind of have to do this, so how do we go about doing it? Do we keep shoving it down people's throats, or do we go like, well, no, it's just like it's like you see someone down the street, okay, fine, okay, so yeah, there's a same-sex couple down there, they're just shopping and doing whatever, and they're not really bothering anyone, so we'll kind of have to do that.
To use an example, like when they first did the announcements of the casting for The Force Awakens, it made sense that you'd have a Hispanic lead, a person of color lead that was African American, a woman as your major lead characters. That made sense. There probably weren't enough that studios would have felt comfortable casting those parts in the 70s, but now they could definitely do it.
Yeah, because because let's face it, Billy D. Williams was basically the token black guy in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi.
And
really...
in the 70s/80s, he was the guy that the studios would say, yeah, let's put him in here to try to increase the African American demographic turnout in the audience. And the same thing with Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, and
for the prequel.
Yeah, and what kind of bothered me was like, even back when the prequel trilogy was out, yeah, I mean, you had more black and Hispanic and Asian people
in the movie,
right? So it does kind of have to reflect the audience today, but but in a way that doesn't talk down to people, doesn't try and shove it down your throat, or tell you that you're a racist or a sexist or whatever. If
or
you
Russian bot.
Right, if you don't like being pandered to. Because I was actually watching Mecha Random's review of Doctor Who, episode 2 for series 11 earlier, and she's acknowledging that she's bisexual, but she doesn't feel a need to be represented in everything, and she doesn't like being pandered to. So it's like
they're calling it season 11 now.
Yeah. Oh, season 11.
Yeah, they're going to the American way of labeling it to try to broaden the audience impact.
All right, well, this kind of segues into our next topic for discussion because, Doctor Who
had an episode.
Yeah, happened. Yeah,
there were a few little points that made me smile, made me like the episode, but it was very bland.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that actually because, let's kind of go down the numbers though. After last week, and this is according to digitalspy.com. Quoting from the article, after last weekend's record-breaking debut, Jodie Whittaker's first Doctor Who series continues to perform strongly in the ratings. The second episode, The Ghost Monument, premiered last night, October 14th, and drew in an overnight audience of 7.1 million, according to BBC's Lizo Mzimba. I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly. If I didn't, please don't fire me. But while that's a million fewer, God, I hate when people use less in the article, okay? Use your freaking proper grammar. It's 1 million fewer. You can count people.
I mean, let's face it, a premiere always gets more views. That's just a thing.
Yeah.
And a million drop isn't that significant at this point. I mean, it's 2 episodes. You really need to see 3 to see a trend. I mean, unless you have access to super data analytics that the BBC probably does right now.
Yeah, and it's still pretty good, for the show. I mean, it's like, yeah, there's interest in this, and as far as the show itself, next episodes are going to have Rosa Parks because they're doing that. Got to look at the opening credits. They're pretty interesting. It's a throwback to the original series, like with a little psychedelic kind of like background, and then you've got the credits on top. Really kind of going, I mean, they're really kind of pushing the whole old school aesthetic here.
You mean like with Venetian Aikido?
Yes.
That was one of the moments that made me just smile a little bit. Like I said, oh, I like that callback. I like that. That was nice.
But yeah, that there were some things, and I'm just gonna get the parts I want to bitch about out of the way real quick.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So the episode opens because, as we saw last week, the 4 leads got teleported into space accidentally, and it looked like they were going to pull a Leia Poppins in space, but no, they got picked up, separated by a couple of ships in a race to get to a planet which actually has been removed from its orbit, which is why they teleported into space. It was supposed to be on the teleport to the planet. So yeah, really weird. But so Whittaker basically tries to take command of the situation, as the Doctor usually does. And but I kind of like the energy though, because she's telling the one guy who basically rescued her and Yaz, she's basically trying to boss him around and get him to take emergency measures because the ship is about ready to fly apart. And then Yaz is panicking, so she turns around and says, "Oh no, we're going to be fine," and then goes right back to telling the pilot, "Look, if you don't do this, we're going to fly apart."
So, and one of my favorite comments that came out after the Big Bad was describing how the entire planet has been made. What was the word? Made
uninhabitable, basically.
No, but there was like a word that the antagonist, and I'm not even sure that's an accurate word for it, for the episode called The Planet, that everything's been made cruel or something like that.
Cruel, yes. Because so the premise is that there's a race going on for like a bazillion galactic credits or whatever, and it started off with something like 4,000 entrants, and there are only 2 remaining, and those 2 managed to crash land on the same planet, each one having picked up one half of the TARDIS crew. So the Doctor, basically has to try and find out where the TARDIS is, and at the same time try and help these 2, because the stakes are a little bit more present here in this episode. Not enough still for my liking, but they're bigger, I thought, than what they were in last week's episode. So what do you think?
And so comment was about how the air was made toxic and the water was made toxic, to which somebody on Twitter made the comment, said, so basically Australia.
Pretty much, but yeah, and this is the thing that I have trouble believing, that breaks suspension of disbelief. If the air is toxic, then how is it everyone is able to breathe it just fine with no problems?
Remember they got the little magic doohickey from the health pods injected into them?
Right, but that's, I thought that was like a universal translator.
It also injected that too. These are really advanced contrivium pods.
Okay, so I must have missed that bit of dialogue there, but it's yeah. So the atmosphere is toxic. The water is filled with flesh-eating microbes. Yeah. So yeah, and then of course they're on a deadline to make it through to the Ghost Monument, which early on is revealed to be the TARDIS. And I was
Which
thinking,
I really liked that reintroduction of the TARDIS.
yeah, and honestly though, I thought, and this is one of my complaints, is why are you revealing this towards the beginning of the episode instead of towards the end?
They also could have made the Ghost Monument look more vague. It could have just been a weird blue blur if they really wanted to do that.
Yeah, or something more vague that you couldn't quite tell, but you kind of hoped. Because honestly, it kind of diminished the stakes here. So if we already know that it's a TARDIS, well then, where's the mystery? I mean, why
Well,
not
this
just
is this
call it?
episode really wasn't about mystery.
Then why call it the Ghost Monument then? It's like, I mean, it kind of
Because it's
suggests
ghostly.
mystery, and we actually get a little bit of a hint of mystery because there's these. Well, we come to find out in the episode, and again, spoiler heavy, but uh, we get a lot more hints from some of the bad guys because it turns out the planet has been engineered to really kind of produce weapons of mass destruction and other assorted killing tools. And
And also, the tooth monsters were a lot more significant than the first episode would give you an initial impression.
yeah, it looks like they're pretty much a big bad of the season because, yeah, I mean, it's, and I think that part of that is because the weird way that copyright law works in Britain because they don't have like works for hire the way we do here in the United States, where if you create a character for, say, Marvel Comics, and Marvel Comics keeps the character so that even if you leave Marvel, you can't take that character with you. You don't necessarily get paid royalties. But over in England, and this is, again, this is why BBC was starting to grow sour on Stephen Moffat, was because every time they brought back the Daleks or the Cybermen or
They had to
the
pay their
Centaur,
creators.
right, they had to pay their creators or the estates of the creators royalties. So, when they brought back the Zygons for the 50th anniversary special and later for an episode in Series 9, they had to pay out royalties. And, and BBC doesn't like to pay out too much money.
They like to be cheap.
Right. So anytime you create a new character, and I think this is because of changes in those laws, that the new character, you create that and they don't have to pay out quite as much. Now, obviously, if I don't know how this would apply if Stephen Moffat, because he created several characters throughout his tenure, I don't know if Chibnall wanted to bring those back, would he have to pay Moffat for
Yes.
the use of those?
So I think he actually has the rights to the Weeping Angels.
Okay,
I
so
think.
all right, so we might not see the Weeping Angels for a while, if ever, under Chibnall's run, but
Though I think they kind of went to that well a few times too many.
yeah, probably. Although, maybe give them a rest for a while and then see how someone who can actually write handles them. But yeah, but, kind of getting back to the story here, the one thing that interested me is that this actually kind of ties in with what we were just talking about with regards to the inclusion of LGBT characters, because the one
Racer mentioned her wife
right.
in passing, and
Right, and it's just like it's not played up. It's just a throwaway line, just kind of give her some background, and actually, that we're I had this kind of debate on a forum with one guy who doesn't understand the difference between character development and a character premise, because he thinks a premise is what happens with the development, and I was like, no, I kind of went to film school for this. I know what I'm talking about, so. but the premise is basically what the character learns as a result of the action within the story. So, and there's a line in there by the male racer
Mhm.
who describes, and again, this is what I really like about Chibnall. He's very good at character-driven stories, but the male racer goes ahead and gives a bit of his own background where
He was abused by his mother to be taught never to trust anybody.
right, and that actually kind of is a message of the episode in a way because you learn never to trust people.
But at the
But
end of
yeah,
the episode, it was all about how we need to come together, to work together to survive, bad
right,
situations.
and actually despite your upbringing, you kind of do have to learn how to trust people because otherwise you will not survive. So that's actually kind of the lesson of the episode,
And
basically.
those weird little towel monsters were trying to spread fear and distrust.
Right, and actually they also kind of revealed a little bit of mystery about the doctor, because
Maybe.
yeah,
We'll
because this
see.
is kind of a yeah setting yeah, and I hope this doesn't turn out to be another magic mystery box because and I won't give that a little bit away if you haven't seen the episode yet. Go ahead and watch it, but uh, there is a lot of uh, there's a lot of people, and myself included, who are just kind of sick of the magic mystery box and really, uh, you know, are tired of being strung along with the promise of answers and then never getting any. So I hope Chibnall uh, is wise enough not to do this.
Or, hopefully he actually has a point with it.
Yeah, because otherwise I'm I'm probably gonna get upset and
What I liked was the younger male character whose name is escaping me right now.
Ryan.
How Ryan had that little Call of Duty moment against the robots. They went up to shoot them, and
Yeah,
then they just all got back up, and he had to run back in and hide.
yeah,
Admittedly, I don't like New Who's aversion to violence and guns because no, the Doctor Who's used guns before on multiple occasions.
yeah. Pretty much going back to the beginning. So, but
But
it's funny to see how it. Uh, he starts going
yeah,
in guns blazing and realizing, oh yeah, well wait a minute, that's not going to work.
and also these robots look weirdly like something from Mass Effect or Destiny.
Yeah. Well,
So
speaking,
I think that was kind of an on purpose sort of look to set up that scene later.
yeah, quite possibly. But we also got our first glimpse into the TARDIS interior,
I,
which
I don't particularly care for it, but it
yeah,
kind of
I'm not sold on it either. Of course, I didn't care for the choral grunge console that we were introduced to in 2005, and for Eccleston and Tennant's run.
but it kind of weirdly fits the moment in the beginning of the episode where she was like working in that weird English garage with the space alien machine that she was taking from the tooth monsters.
You're right,
I
and
mean,
it built the
it
sonic
has to.
screwdriver. It kind of looks like, yeah, it kind of looks in keeping with the sonic screwdriver. So, I
So
mean,
I mean, I like that aspect of it that it aesthetically seems to have a meaning, but I just don't like the look.
yeah, it's really, I don't know. Although, well, I think probably the cheesiest part of it was there's a built-in snack dispenser on the console now.
Yeah.
It's like it's all crystalline and everything, but it's got a snack dispenser. I mean, so, seriously, this is kind of, although something we haven't actually seen for a while in Doctor Who is that there's actually kind of a more of a tunnel between the police box doors and the interior of the console room, because
They kind of had that with Capaldi's TARDIS interior, but not
yeah,
as pronounced.
yeah, yeah, and it's more like the console room. I mean, the way you look at it, it's like you get the police box, and then you've got the walls of the police box as opposed to just the doors, and then right. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but like I said, it doesn't really look much like something you. It looks more like something that the Ronnie might have. If you
Yeah,
remember that character from the classic era, she had Hers looked much more like some kind of like weird pyramid design, and the interior kind of reflected that aesthetic. So I don't know, but yeah, I'm not quite sold on it. Maybe it'll grow on me as time goes on. I was kind of hoping for a more classic look to it, because if you look at, everything else about the show, it seems like they're really going old school in terms of both storytelling and aesthetics. And then, oh yeah, now you've got this whole crystalline thing.
And in the previews for the next episode, there seems to be another time traveler who's trying to alter historical events for some reason, which I'm curious where they're going with that.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, we'll have to see what happens. But I, for one, am really looking forward actually to episode 3. But again, and again, this is my complaint about Chibnall, is that the stakes really don't seem to be there enough. And this episode, okay, was decent enough in my opinion. It's certainly way better than anything produced under the Moffat era. But again, it seems like everything's resolved a little bit too easily.
But it's not about whatever the monster of the week situation is. It's all about the characters and what they're going through.
Right, which I don't mind, but at the same time, it's like because Davies was about plot but no character. Moffat couldn't do plot or character, and now we've got Chibnall who does character but not really plot. So it's like, why can we not have both character and plot in our stories? Because they're equal. I mean, to me, they're equally important. I mean, yeah, you can have your character-driven stories, but you still need the story there to make it interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, well, I'll keep on. Like I said, I'll keep watching. Like I said, I mean, there are parts to like about this. There are parts not I think are still a bit weak, but in my opinion, yeah. I mean, it was a little bit better than last week. Kind of felt like a continuation, like a second part of a two-parter, actually. So maybe if you take both episodes together, you could probably have more.
I mean, it's a two-parter to a certain respect, but it just kind of it needed something more, but I can't really put my finger on what that more is yet. I mean, we didn't even really see. I mean, we kind of see a little bit more about what Jodie Whittaker is saying as the Doctor. Her Doctor seems to be a lot more self-doubting and a lot more humble.
Yeah, and I have to wonder because and there's actually brings me to a point that I made last week because I referenced a bit in 2015 in the episode Hell Bent. That was a season ender of season 9, and it featured a male character that was originally introduced in the 50th anniversary special, and he regenerates into a female form, and she says, "Oh, back to normal, am I?" And it's like, how do you cope with all that ego? Because apparently that was her only time as a guy. The way it was written. So, maybe that's what we're seeing is like the Doctor's ego has been kind of like reduced. And I don't know if they're suggesting, that because the Doctor's a woman, she's not as egotistical. I don't know. If that's the case, I've seen plenty of women who have massive egos. I mean,
we could kind of see Capaldi's Doctor as the ending dying rage of Matt Smith and David Tennant's ego as the Doctor. But if that's what they're going for, then what does Jodie Whittaker's Doctor do when she crosses the threshold of washing her hands of that part of her past?
Yeah, and also you have to keep in mind, with this teaser, because it really, there's a reference to the Doctor's childhood, and the Doctor, again, we get hints of more mystery, and it I wonder if Chibnall is attempting something along the lines of the Cartmel master plan, where he's trying to re-inject some mystery into the Doctor.
Um,
Because I don't know if he really
there
should be
there have
going
been
down that road if that's what he's doing, or
there
if
have
this
been
is actually.
there've been 3 or 4 attempts at canon of the Doctor's childhood, and I don't think that's a bad idea to go with, but it depends on what they're doing and if it's significantly different than those prior attempts.
Yeah, so yeah, this is one of those things where, like, yeah, I'm tempted to keep tuning in to see what happens, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, they really kind of need to step up their game. I mean, Series 11 or Season 11, whichever they want to call it, um, you know, the, it's already basically completed. But the thing is, though, if it keeps along like this, where the stakes don't really feel right, I mean, there's still a lot of people who are uh, refusing to tune in just because the Doctor is not being played by a woman. But I'm kind of worried because if they don't step it up, in terms of the stories, then are we going to see Whitaker exit at the end of Series 11, and then
No, because her first series, season, whatever you want to call it, it's going to do better numbers than any that Capaldi did, and it's going to do better numbers than most of what Matt Smith did, unless there's a sharp drop off somewhere coming up.
right, and well, I suspect because people were kind of so tired of Moffat and his endless mystery box. I'm the greatest guy in the universe. Because after 7 seasons and of massive ego and Gary Stewism, I think people were kind of ready for a change because honestly, there doesn't seem to be much Gary Stewism or Mary Sueism, except to the extent that, like I said, I mean, crises tend to get solved a little too easily, and I think that's because they're focusing on characters so much that the plot itself seems to suffer. So I don't know. It seems like I, I don't want to say it's bad, but at the same time, I don't want to say that it's spectacular either. It
The
seems to me
real
like
test
this
is
is
going to
kind of
be
returning more
the real
towards
test.
the Eccleston era.
The real test is going to be what happens in season 12,
Yeah,
and more importantly, what happens in season 13, because being super duper realistic in ways that nobody wants to think about is whoever becomes the star of Doctor Who after 3 series, they become a much bigger actor than they were when they started.
right,
So, can they afford to keep her if she does well for 3 series or does okay for two and mediocre for one?
right, right. And although we are getting some hints from the Digital Spy article where the next episode is going to be titled Rosa, and that's going to feature about Rosa Parks in the civil rights era. But then episode 4 is going to be called Arachnids in the UK, and that's kind of a play on on the Sex
Yeah.
Pistols song Anarchy in the UK. So
And also, you notice that they talk about civil rights in America, but not about, British civil rights stuff that happened during a comparable time period.
yeah, because upcoming guest stars are going to feature Chris Noth, and then you've got Broadchurch's Jodie Hesmanhog, and
Yeah.
because she was in series 3 of Broadchurch playing a rape victim. Then we've got Alan Cumming in a Shakespearean era episode. That we've also got Lee Mack, Sherlock Svennet Robinson. They're coming up in the later in season 11. So yeah, I mean that they're playing up the guest stars as a selling point. But like I said, I mean I hope the rest of the series isn't going to be like this because I really kind of want it to. I mean, it seems like we've gone from one extreme to the other, where we've gone
So,
from someone who promised big epic stories and then let us down to someone who's promising character stories but not really focusing enough on plot.
and also for those who are listening who don't know about it, there was a bus boycott sort of scenario in the UK that happened in 1963. That was apparently inspired by Rosa Parks, and the buses were, trying not to serve people of color, which is a much broader list, and as well as Irish. So I find it interesting and kind of cowardly that they're not willing to address what happened in their own home market, but instead want to focus on what happened in America. Because quite honestly, I think an American audience could get more out of it if they are actually trying to go to a historical and educational program that they seem to want to go towards. If they actually, you know, talk about that perspective from British history. Like nobody in America knows about the mafia in the UK and the organized crime world in the UK. And we've had a couple movies here and there, but nothing significant made it over to our pop culture. And that could be something really unique that they could do that could really differentiate them, is focus on these moral lessons from actual British history.
Yeah, because it seems. Well, I think part of the reason is because they're trying to appeal as much to American audiences as they are to British audiences. So they're kind of giving us these little snippets into. Yeah, and plus I think because if you remember, Torchwood, like that, the last series they had of Torchwood was actually set as much in America because it was produced jointly with Stars, right? So,
Yeah.
So they kind of had to do, and plus also, if you remember back in Series 6 of Doctor Who, way back in 2011, they had they had scenes that they filmed in America. So it seems like there's probably maybe a joint funding going on where they're kind of like obligated to set some stories in the United States and involve American actors.
I think it's because they have an American audience, and doing some filming in the U.S. enables them to sell the show better.
Sure, kind of like what they tried to do with the 1996 TV movie, except back then it didn't work out because the American audience didn't really pick up on it, even though it did well in Britain.
And it was a 90s TV movie.
Right.
90s TV movies were kind of rough and all over the place.
Yeah, I remember the Generation X TV movie, which yeah. Which actually, I think I want to go back and review some of these old 90s TV movies because Generation X, on paper, it was good. They were meant to be the replacement for the New Mutants, which had already for some years.
Well, no, in the comic book, I'm not so much sure they were a replacement for New Mutants.
Well,
not really sure what they.
To the extent that it was like basically X-Men: The Next Generation or something, because the whole reason the New Mutants existed to begin with was because after like 15 years or whatever, they kind of wanted to.
We can't talk about these people at high school anymore.
Right.
They're not in high school.
Right. So now you had to have a new group of students, and then 10 years go by, and they're they pretty much got worn out, and then Rob Liefeld came around and turned them into X-Force, and so then they needed, by the mid '90s, they needed a new group of students. So, well, hey, let's throw Jubilee and a whole bunch of other new mutants into the mix, and we'll have Banshee and the White Queen teach up.
Which was an interesting dynamic.
Right. So, so that it was still new, so they decided to make a TV movie out of it, and yeah, it was very '90s. But they had what was the name of the actress? Was it Fiona Hughes playing Emma Frost? She was on this daytime TV soap opera. She's British, and yeah. So it was one of those things where it's like, nah, this really didn't work. So yeah, we'll probably I'll see if I can find that somewhere and see if I can rewatch it and do a review next time. But anyway, this is Micah Wilk and Larry Bernard. If you like what we hear, if you like what you hear and you want to hear more, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to receive notification whenever we upload new content. Also, head over to our Patreon page. Feel free to become a donor and to receive the exclusive content that you won't get on the regular channel. And that's pretty much it. So, take care. Good night.
Sayonara.
Yeah, we are out of here. And stay warm because it's getting cold out in the northern hemisphere, finally. Good.
He's actually getting comfortable in Florida finally.
Woo! All right, but hopefully no more hurricanes.
We got another month or two.
Yeah, well, yeah, stay safe out there. So, all right. But yeah, good night, everyone.